Sean Biddle. He's an editor of the Dropout Nation. He's done a lot of editorial work. He'll tell you more about himself briefly. But we asked him to be on our Connecticut Parents Youth and Advisory Committee. He's from New York because, number one, it gives us that media outlet, and because he is like 200% behind parental engagement. I mean, he gets it. And then he speaks about it on the World Wide Web. So we were pleasure to have him here, even though, so he's welcoming us to this event, but not necessarily to Connecticut, because we're welcoming you to Connecticut again. But I definitely like him to give you a brief overview of who he is, maybe like 3 minutes, and that'll be fine. And then after you speak, then I can do basically why we're here. Just shifting up a little bit based on the
context. That's fine. That's fine. I can do, whatever works.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
That's it. The editor of Dropout Nation. I would say one of the leading, if not the leading, journal on education reform issues in the country. Also, as well, columnist for the American Spectator magazine. Yes, even conservatives care about education. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. It's a great pleasure to talk to you. It's a great pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this first session of the Connecticut Parents Union. This first opportunity to engage parents, engage families, engage communities. We're here because we care about the most important thing. We're here for the most important mission that any adult, any father, mother, caregiver should care about. That is improving education for our children and giving them the very best that they need so they can be able to write their own stories of success. By the time you leave this session today, not only will you be a better advocate for your children, you'll be a better advocate for everybody's children. As my pastor would say, it's like reading your Bible. You will be a better, stronger activist for children and for families. And more than ever, we need that. Because we really do need a revolution, not an evolution, in American and Connecticut's public education. You think about this. Each and every day, far too many kids are being condemned to poverty, to prison, to lives of misery, simply because they aren't able to get the high-quality teaching, the high-quality curriculum, the nurturing cultures of genius that will allow them to achieve their potential. That is unconscionable. Far too many kids are told that because of where they live, because they landed in a different zip code, that they will not get anything that equates to what we'd call a high-quality education. And we have parents who are being put into jail, put into prison, because they're doing everything they can to help their kids succeed. And if that doesn't give children the opportunities to achieve their very best. So I want you, each and every one of you, to take the energy, take the information, take the tools that you will receive today and fight fiercely, like mothers, like fathers, like caregivers, like the people that you are for your kids. I want each and every one of you to challenge Challenge your schools to do better. Challenge your leaders to do better. Challenge your teachers to do better. Support and elevate those who are doing better for your kids. And just take action. And together, work with each other, not only individually, but share that knowledge, share that energy, share and rally and fight fiercely. So now, we're going to first bring up Christina Bonet. And Bonet.
The young lady with the last name.
And just me.
Yeah.
And she is working with Connecticut Bayo. She has been involved with both with the State of Black Connecticut Alliance and with an advisory board member on the Connecticut Parents Union. Welcome.
Thank you. Is it okay if I take off my jacket?
It's okay.
Is that right? Everybody comfortable?
Well, you heard what our commissioner said. You need to take it off because we have a real conversation with an attorney.
All right.
I need the attorney part of it.
Okay, I'm gonna get comfortable because we're a small group, so I can, you come from the corporate background, you bring that with you into everything that you do. So I'm fully suited up, so I'm gonna get a little easy, you know. So as Rashawn mentioned, my name is Christina Bonet, and I am from New York. I'm an attorney, and new attorney, graduated in May from law school, and have decided to commit my career to education law and education reform. So my background is, it's all legislative, it's all legal. So usually when you see me, my questions will be about how are you working to change the law? And I realized that in the work that I've been doing, that a lot of people understand the practical effects of the law without understanding what the law is and how it causes those practical effects. So I'm here today to teach you guys and to educate everyone here on a little bit about No Child Left Behind, Title I, and specifically in the context of parental involvement. So as I'm speaking, since we're keeping it informal, all right, little man in the back is ready. It's okay. As I'm speaking, if you have any questions or anything, anything comes to your mind, feel free to stop me, because we're gonna keep this very informal. So, what is No Child Left Behind? Essentially, No Child Left Behind is a federally funded mandate. The federal government has taken a stance on what they feel education should be throughout the country. But as many of you may know, education is technically and constitutionally a state issue. So the federal government has a very limited role under the Constitution as to what it can do in states. How does the federal government get around it? Well, it says, okay, we'll give you money, but if you take this money, there's certain practices that we feel are best practices that you have to implement. So that's what No Child Left Behind is. It is fully funded. Once upon a time it wasn't. So now there are funds attached to it to aid both parents, schools, school districts in implementing what the federal government feels to be best practices. Now, Title I of No Child Left Behind deals specifically with disadvantaged students. A lot of people think that that means students who are maybe have a disability or so on and so forth, and that's not what it means. Disadvantaged children basically just means everybody that is not up to speed, that is not academically proficient, reading below grade level, doing math below grade level. So, in a state like Connecticut, where that's a very large portion of the population, disadvantaged students becomes actually more than the quote-unquote advantaged students. So Title I is a very, very important provision within No Child Left Behind. Now, the purpose of this title, of Title I, is to ensure that all children have a fair, equal, and significant opportunity to obtain a high quality, not average quality, not substandard quality, a high quality education, and reach at a minimum proficiency on challenging state academic achievement standards and state academic assessments. So this is the base. This is the floor, not the ceiling. So we do have a ways to go. Now, the federal government has been very clear on the fact that parental involvement is a necessity to achieving academic success. And that is extremely important because that's a fairly new, it's like, why would parental involvement be a new concept? But it is, it is. So the federal government has defined parental involvement as the participation of parents in regular two-way and meaningful communication involving student academic learning and other school activities, including assisting their child's learning, being actively involved in their child's education at school, serving as partners in their child's education, and being included at appropriate and in decision-making as an advisory committee to assist in the education of their child. So this is not my child comes home from school, I check their homework, and that's sufficient. That's not what the federal government is viewing as parental involvement. It's a two-way communication with the child, with the teachers, with administrators. It's the your child's entire academic process. Parents should be involved in that process on every level. That's what the federal government views as parental involvement.
And they're saying that, and we push back on this one extremely, and what they've done is the parents who push back are no longer invited to anything. But they say that the parent liaisons represent parents, and we're state they do not represent parents because they are paid by the school district, and some of them don't even live in our district, don't even have parents in our schools, children in our schools. So what you're saying in like the advisory council, that should be parents. And Title I reading night should be run by parents. Reach out to the community should be done by parents. With maybe a bridge, but not by just the parent liaisons.
Okay, now here's where it gets very tricky.
That's what
it gets very tricky because the way No Child Left Behind and the way Title I is written, it's very broad. It doesn't tell states that, okay, you have to have 5 parents, and those parents have to be, cannot be paid by X, Y, and Z. So what states do to try to get around doing what they know they're supposed to be doing is what you mentioned. They hire, X, Y, and Z, but they cannot exclude you from the meetings and what are some of the functions that the liaison?
We were all part of, I was president and treasurer and secretary of the advisory district council.
President, secretary, and treasurer.
At different
Somebody
times.
else wanted it.
No, I got it all. But at different times.
Okay.
And when I disagreed that we needed more parents, that we could not have all parent liaisons and not parents, I was forced out by the community liaison in downtown. I have a grandchild in the school system, which qualifies me under Title I to be there. She said because I'm not a parent, I couldn't be there. So I mean, it got really nasty.
I'm sure.
And we had a meeting with the lawyer from the city and stuff. But my issue is, I'm willing to fight that, but we lost over 25 parents because they weren't coming back after this. And we had it very active. We were in schools doing things. But because of a couple people, and they downtown knew, we filed with Washington, we filed with the state. This person is still in charge, and there are 0 parents.
What happens is so many people give up, and they get so just disheartened by the entire situation that they don't continue to push. So my recommendation would be continue with that, but also if parents want to be involved, this information, knowledge is power at the end of the day.
I had a Title I book like this at the meeting, and I'm like, which statute would you like to say that you're in violation of? And they said, that doesn't pertain to us, we're allowed to do what we want.
Well, that's not true, and that's why you continue with the suit. But in terms of the parents who were involved and decided to stay not being involved, you don't have to be at those meetings to be involved. In the sense that if for whatever reason there is something blocking you, you continue to push, but continue to also educate yourselves, continue to work with your children, continue to, that's parental involvement, it's very broad.
Right.
And it has to continue on all levels.
Right.
So that's what you have to do. Yes, know what the law is, yes, continue, file, complain, do everything you can on all sides, but that does not mean to say that if there is some sort of barrier, because there will be, and everybody here is fully aware of that. We're all fighting an uphill battle.
Well, no, we have we're housed in a youth service, and we run educational bridge building classes for parents with schools. I mean, other than me one-on-one, I do have a relationship with the school system. I can educate parents on how to build those bridges. I do go to PPTs and stuff. It's just that this avenue is still in place. Like, we have the governance boards coming in.
School governance council, yes.
Yeah, okay. They've already put in place an advisory council from downtown that will pick who's on that board.
We'll actually talk about that later.
Yeah.
So we can let you finish.
Yes.
And then we talk about that, because that's definitely on the agenda.
Okay. So what are school districts and schools required to do under Title I? Where primarily, there's supposed to be a written parent involvement policy. And the policy is supposed to be developed with parents to foster effective parental involvement techniques, and from community to community, from school district to school district, that's going to change. But once the policy is implemented, one, it has to be developed with parents, and that's really the critical component. Because if parents are not involved in that process, ultimately what you end up with is a policy that doesn't work in the way that it's supposed to. If it doesn't foster parental involvement, if it doesn't create an environment where parents feel like they are a part of the process and that they can really have some sort of impact on their child's education and best practices, then it's not effective. So the parental involvement policy is critical. Schools must involve parents in deciding how Title I funds are allocated for parental involvement programs. So now you have money involved, which always is a little sticky, but this is what is supposed to happen. Schools are supposed to assist individual schools school districts, have to assist individual schools in building greater capacity and expertise in developing strong parental involvement programs. They have to provide technical assistance and any other support necessary to assist participating schools in planning and implementing effective parent involvement activities. Now, just 1 second, in an area where 90% of the population is, let's say, Hispanic and English is a second language, what you have to do then is in the policy, there need to be practices where maybe the policy is written in English and in Spanish. Maybe there are meetings and there's a translator at the meeting so that parents are still in the know. And from community to community, from policy to policy, those practices are going to change. And this is why No Child Left Behind and Title I is written in the way it is. Because from community to community, best practices are going to vary. But that's why another reason why parents have to be involved, because only the parents will understand what the needs are. If you have a community where, let's say, 75% of the population lives below the poverty line, maybe you need to get a bus to go and pick up parents, to come to meetings, to come to functions, to come to whatever is going on, PTA night, PTA or parent-teacher night. These are practices that may be necessary. And without them, the parents can't be involved without those types of things. Now, another point that I want to make that is really critical, really critical at a time where money is a hot issue. Schools must reserve no less than 1% of its Title I allocation for the implementation of parent involvement program. No less than 1%. Okay, so there is, not only are schools receiving money for disadvantaged children, but no less than 1% of that money specifically is allocated to developing parental involvement policies. So the money is there to some extent, 1% of, let's say, $200,000 or whatever amount of money it's a lot of money. And we have to hold, just one second, we have to hold our schools accountable for this funding. The funding is here for parents. So parents first have to know that the funding is there. But two, once it's there, they have to demand that it be spent where it's supposed to be.
Written for a few years. My question is, does the district have to allocate that money to certain schools, or can it, in other words, let's say school A gets a certain amount from Title I. Does 1% of that money have to go back to that school, or is this all done at the district level?
For parental involvement programs.
So the
now, if
district
the
can't put it
school
all
district
into-
requests to get a certain amount of money, then the school district then has the authority to say 1%, and they can kind of distribute how they need to
Had one, Marlene, she wasn't able to attend, and so I put it up on the screen, actually in A3. The school districts get the dollars, and the school districts determine how they're spent. And so when I spoke to her, and I actually, and again, I will email this to you, there was a letter that was sent to all districts, where is it? On April 12th. And it talks about their monitoring. Commissioner McQuillan alluded somewhat to that in regards to how they're going to monitor a certain district. Although he's in Wyndham, they're going to come in to help. So, but what Connecticut doesn't do well is a parent can make this request about the 1%, but you won't find it. When I spoke to Kentucky, I actually did like a homework assignment on Facebook. Can you tell me? Connecticut Waterbury had to say, we'll get back to you. People couldn't readily find that line item. And the reason why I want to know about the 1% is because we do have school governance councils. And I know that you're saying that parents need to be involved. Connecticut parents do want to be involved to the capacity they're able to get in. But we know there's going to have to be a shifting in the law to demand it, right? Because if feds can only regulate it, right, and the state, then there has to be a changing of the law because our outcomes aren't there. And so I'm hoping that you will be able to speak maybe some recommendations as parents, what we can do. Yes, we can sue, right? Yes, we can. I even think that's a stall tactic, right? Or you can file a complaint because they want the complaint to go through its 30 channels, right? So our kids, by the time we get to 30 channels, they would have grown to be 30. Right? So we have to change that. So I'm hoping that from the legal aspect of it, if you can help us as caregivers, what are our rights legally? Because our Constitution says we do have a right to this good stuff. And are we going to have to end up having the conversations with unions or the parents union have to sit with the union saying, look, this is what you're doing. This is what we're going to need to do. I don't want to be your enemy, but we have to change some things. So I just want to know if, what could be some recommendations about how we can improve our systems, because we shouldn't have to be bumping into walls one after another just trying to get some basic information. So maybe I should, when you begin to summarize this, if you can kind of give us maybe some recommendations of what parents can do.
Understanding it, but at the end of the day, sometimes you have to step outside of client time. You don't want to educate my child, I'm taking my child out. Oh, you're serious. You're serious about what you're requesting, and I think one of the biggest problems that I find is that parents don't understand the power they have as parents, and it's they're very intimidated by these institutions, and you have administrators and principals and so on saying, well, you need to do this, and then you're being scolded, and at the end of the day, it's just like, no, as parents, you really have to understand, you have to explain to them that these are your children. After 4 years, they're out of elementary school, they're out of high school. Administrators do not have the authority to speak to you, and definitely not to speak to your children and belittle them, undermine parents' authority. That is not acceptable. That is unacceptable. And I think empowering parents and teaching them and making sure that they understand their true worth as parents, that's a big part of what we have to do. So, moving on. I'm going to get through this, and then we can continue talking about other things. Okay, now once the policy, the parental involvement policy is established, it needs to be distributed to parents. So as a parent, you should have a copy of your parental involvement policy. It should be public. It should be public, it should be written, and you need to get a copy of that if it's in existence. Now, before that, yes.
Is that also open to the public if you're not a parent and you just want to know what's happening inside the school system?
See, it's according
Yes,
to.
it is. From
Okay.
what I understood, it absolutely is, because we receive federal dollars, you can actually make the request. In most districts,
Okay.
the good districts post it on their website. You know, people
Right.
make it very accessible. For those
Right.
who don't want you to know, you have to do FOIA, and then you have to, go to the house on Thanksgiving, things like that, to get it. But, but it's supposed to be, in Connecticut, it's supposed to be so public friendly. It's just really not.
Right. But as a parent, you should definitely have a copy of the parental involvement policy. That is beyond critical. Everybody here is here because we're committed and we're working with parents, we're working with teachers. So please spread the word. Let parents know that they should have a copy of this. At the very least, they should have a copy of it. So notify parents of the policy in an understandable and uniform format, and to the extent practicable, in a language that the parents can understand. So language is definitely an issue. The policy has to be available to the local community and updated periodically to meet the challenges of parents, whatever they're facing. So that answers your question. There is supposed to be an annual meeting where the policy is reviewed, where the programs that it implements are evaluated. Are they working effectively? Do parents feel like their needs are being met? Do parents feel like they are being included in their child's education, in the policies of the school, from the administrators, principals, all the way down? If not, the policy needs to be revised. See, people are writing, so I'll give everyone a chance to get down if they want to get down.
And again, I'm going to email everyone. Everything she's saying, I'm actually scrolling through the document, the monitoring protocol. So everything she's saying, I am just going through it. So again, I will email this document so that you will have what Attorney Christine.
As I said, this evaluation should lead to ultimately more effective parental involvement policies, and it should, result in assessing how the policies have been working, how the programs have been working, and if they're not, they should be reevaluated. Now, the federal government also provides some suggestions. These aren't mandated, these are not required by states, but they're practices that the government has decided that these work, and they include everything from providing training for parents about Title I to any other reasonable support that parents may need in understanding and being a part of their child's education. So schools really do have a bit of leeway in how much they want to or how little they would like to educate parents about best practices, about literacy, about pretty much everything, anything. So it's a very difficult position, I think, for parents to be in, because all of these policies, though mandated, well, some of which are mandated, there's no check system on them. So you can file a suit, but as Gwen mentioned, it's a lot of red tape. It's a great deal of red tape to go to. And while your child is in school, it could take years to get through that. So the question then becomes, okay, now as a parent, what do? You're educated, which I find can sometimes make you even more frustrated, because you understand what the law says, and you understand what rights you're given, and you feel as if, well, what can I do? I know I'm being wronged, and I can't do anything about it. Well, you can do a lot about it, from filing suit, but also mobilizing parents. And at the end of the day, I believe wholeheartedly in doing that and being prepared to take it as far as it needs to go. And with angering parents, with educating them and hopefully getting them upset enough, not jaded. A lot of parents are jaded. They feel, oh, you know, but getting them angry enough to say, I'm going to take it as far as I need to make these changes happen. That's where parents need to be. Because I think what the representative, the commissioner said earlier is absolutely correct. The next 4 years are crucial. The achievement gap is not closing, and the 3K curriculum, the Know Your Child, Know Your School, Know Your Community, I think that is step one. You have to understand what the system is. You have to understand where your child is going to school. One, with Title I, you have to know if your school is even receiving Title I funds. Because if they're not receiving Title I funds, nothing that I just said pertains to anything that your school or your child is having to deal with. So there's a list of schools. I have a hard copy if anybody wants to see one now, and Gwen has.
Yeah, I'm actually put on the screen, but again, everything that we're talking about, you will actually have, it's going to be very pertinent that you know what your school districts get, what you should be allocating, and then demanding it. Because we will be talking about action steps, so don't let the small number fool you. You will have homework to do once you leave here. Because if we don't change it, you've heard Commissioner McQuillan, our kids will suffer more than we think they're suffering, and we haven't seen the end of this because the legislative session is not over. So again, I will make sure this information is given to you, but then we need to talk about action steps, how we're going to use this to leverage change.
Teachers, last in, first out, the hours of the school day, that's all written by law, and laws can be changed. They were designed to be changed. There's an entire system set up to change laws. It's a process, but it's a process that we have to be very active in, because there are a great deal of individuals out there spending millions of dollars to lobby and push legislation that is going to hurt your children. And that's a fact. So if we cannot take it upon ourselves to say no, to oppose, to force ourselves into the decision-making table, and to have our own legislation and have our own set of values that will support our children, then their voices are not going to be heard. And it's clear, when you look at the laws, it's very clear that parents were not at the decision-making table. It's very clear. So that's a huge, huge part. So if that means letter writing campaigns, if that means finding an attorney who will draft legislation, push for it. And that's where mobilization becomes very important, because you can have a bill, but if your representatives don't see that this is something that their community is going to support, and they could possibly lose their position unless they support this bill or they support this law, then it doesn't matter. But when you have, hundreds and thousands of parents saying, I'm not even gonna look at you unless you support this. There's no way you're receiving my vote unless you support this. And whatever candidate is supporting this, that's who I'm going to support. That's when you start seeing change in legislation. That's when you start seeing parents and other individuals that have been closed out of the process come into the process. So these are a lot of things that we can do, and I completely push legislation wholeheartedly, because once something's on the books, it's very hard to get it off. So a lot of the work that I do has to do with me getting certain things off, and it's a very, very, very difficult task to get it off the books. So we need to push to get the right policies and the right legislation on the books. So just to recap, Title I, all children, getting them to academic proficiency, not a very high standard, but that's the standard. Getting parents involved as a best practice, getting them educated, getting them in the school, involved in the process from beginning to end on all levels. And if you're being excluded, still educating yourself, still educating parents, doing everything that the policies are supposed to do, but maybe it's going to be outside of school. But the work has to be done, whether it's, you just can't take a break. Letter writing campaigns, pushing legislation, pushing best practices, and doing it in any place, any forum, anywhere that it can be done. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Christine.